The morning air hung thick with frost over Montchau, Germany as December 16th, 1944 dawned. Earth shook beneath the weight of approaching conflict. American artillery shells whistled overhead in patterns soldiers recognized from countless previous bombardments. But veterans on both sides would soon witness something that challenged everything they understood about warfare. Death was about to arrive from an impossible angle. What happened next defied the tactical knowledge accumulated over centuries of combat. The incoming shells refused to follow the predictable trajectories that soldiers counted on for survival. Instead of striking earth or trees with familiar impacts, these projectiles exploded in midair with mathematical precision. Fragments rained down from above like deadly snow. No foxhole offered protection. No tree provided shelter. No tactical position remained safe. The 326th Volksgrenadier Division found themselves caught in a killing zone that operated by new rules. These were hardened troops, veterans who had survived the Eastern Front's brutality, men who understood artillery patterns better than most soldiers understood breathing. Yet, they stood helpless beneath bursts that seemed guided by invisible intelligence. Colonel Oscar Alfred Axelson had just made a decision that would alter the Battle of the Bulge's entire trajectory. The 406th Artillery Group commander faced an impossible choice: follow standing orders and watch American positions get overrun, or deploy the most classified weapon in the Allied arsenal without permission. He chose revolution over regulation. The shells now detonating overhead contained proximity fuses, miniature radar systems packed into artillery rounds, technology so secret that its very existence was known only to the highest levels of command. Each fuse held the destructive potential to multiply artillery effectiveness by factors that seemed impossible. Mathematics was about to transform warfare in ways that would echo through decades of future conflict. Hitler's grand gamble was already 12 hours old when these revolutionary weapons first spoke. Operation Watch on the Rhine had launched with tremendous initial success. 200,000 German soldiers, 1,000 tanks, nearly 2,000 artillery pieces, all assembled in secret through fog-shrouded Ardennes valleys. The Führer promised his generals this offensive would split Allied armies down the middle, recapture Antwerp, turn a losing war into negotiated peace. His commanders knew better, but dared not voice their doubts. Dawn on December 16th brought the heaviest artillery bombardment the Western Front had witnessed since D-Day. German guns fired 1,600 rounds per minute along an 85-mile front. The noise was indescribable. Earth liquefied under the impact of high-explosive shells. American intelligence had failed catastrophically in detecting this massive buildup. Many frontline units consisted of green replacements or exhausted veterans sent to quiet sectors for rest. The surprise was complete. The initial shock devastating. But at Montchau, something unprecedented was about to unfold. The 38th Cavalry Squadron faced overwhelming odds, a small reconnaissance unit against an entire German division. Conventional artillery couldn't stem this tide. Traditional defensive tactics were proving inadequate. Colonel Axelson watched his position deteriorating minute by minute. His decision would either save American lives or cost him his career. Perhaps both. The proximity fuse represented American industrial and scientific capability at its absolute pinnacle. Unlike conventional shells requiring direct hits or timed fuses that often detonated at wrong heights, these weapons contained self-sufficient radar systems smaller than coffee cans. Inside each fuse, American engineers had compressed 130 electronic components. 4 or 5 miniature vacuum tubes depending on the model, all designed to withstand 20,000 times Earth's gravity during firing. The physics involved strained belief. Acceleration during firing would crush human bodies to microscopic thickness. Yet delicate electronic components survived and functioned. The shell had to operate while spinning at extreme rotational speeds, function in all weather conditions, detect targets without premature detonation. Dr. Merle Tuve at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory drove this development with Manhattan Project intensity. The laboratory disguised itself as an abandoned used car dealership in Silver Spring, Maryland. 3% of all American physicists worked there at peak production. Security matched atomic bomb program protocols. Workers couldn't discuss their duties even with spouses. Each fuse carried unique serial numbers for tracking purposes. The technical challenges seemed insurmountable at every stage. Vacuum tubes designed for living room radios required complete redesign to survive cannon firing. They had to function while subjected to forces that would destroy normal electronics. Work in sub-zero conditions and gun barrel heat exceeding 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The breakthrough came through miniaturization techniques that would later revolutionize entire industries. Dr. James Van Allen's tubes measured no larger than pencil erasers, yet contained all elements of conventional radio tubes. By December 1944, American factories produced 40,000 proximity fuses daily. Over 100 companies contributed to the effort: RCA and General Electric, Sylvania and Crossley Corporation, each playing crucial roles in the most expensive weapons program except the atomic bomb. Program costs reached $1 billion 1940s dollars, second only to Manhattan Project spending. The authorization crisis began moments after Axelson's shells found their targets. He had violated direct orders restricting proximity fuses to anti-aircraft use only. Military leadership feared captured examples might be reverse-engineered by German scientists, but the devastating effectiveness at Montchau was undeniable. The German attack had been stopped cold. Casualties shocked observers on both sides. Word reached Supreme Headquarters within hours. General Eisenhower recognized the desperate situation developing across the entire Ardennes front. On December 19th, he formally requested authorization for ground combat use. By December 21st, all restrictions were lifted. Proximity fuses were released for general battlefield employment. The rapid distribution that followed demonstrated American logistical superiority at its finest. Within days, proximity-fused shells reached artillery units throughout the Ardennes. The 463rd Parachute Field Artillery Battalion at Bastogne received their allocation just as German forces closed the encirclement. The 420th Armored Field Artillery Battalion began using them with their M7 Priest self-propelled howitzers. The 969th Artillery Battalion, an African-American unit under Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Barnes, employed them with devastating effect southwest of Bastogne. Each unit discovered identical truths about this revolutionary weapon. Proximity fuses transformed artillery from support weapon into decisive battlefield tool. Forward observers no longer needed careful fire adjustment. The fuses found their own optimal detonation points. Accuracy requirements decreased, while lethality increased exponentially. Artillery had evolved from area weapon into precision instrument. The siege of Bastogne provided perfect conditions for demonstrating proximity fuses in defensive warfare. The 101st Airborne Division found itself completely surrounded and heavily outnumbered. They held vital crossroads against repeated German assaults through sheer determination and superior firepower. Their artillery support included the 463rd Parachute Field Artillery Battalion. These men operated 75mm pack howitzers, capable of firing proximity-fused shells. Between December 19th and 31st, they fired exactly 7,676 rounds, according to official unit records. Not all were proximity-fused due to limited supply, but those that were created devastating psychological and physical effects. German assault formations simply disintegrated under airburst barrages. Entire platoons vanished in seconds. The December 22nd attack followed General McAuliffe's famous "nuts" reply to German surrender demands. It showcased the weapon's effectiveness perfectly. German infantry advanced across snow-covered fields in traditional formations. They were caught completely in the open. Proximity-fused shells detonated overhead with precise timing, created overlapping patterns of destruction that left no safe zones anywhere. The mathematical precision was terrifying. The 969th Artillery Battalion played equally crucial roles in Bastogna's defense. Their 155mm howitzers created rings of death around the perimeter that German forces found absolutely impenetrable. The larger shells detonating at 50 feet covered even greater areas with lethal fragments. German prisoners later reported that attacking units often lost cohesion before reaching American lines. Soldiers fled the incomprehensible airbursts rather than advance. Military discipline collapsed under technological terror. Perhaps the most thoroughly documented demonstration of proximity-fused lethality occurred along the Sauer River near Echternach. December 25th through 26th provided General George Patton with front-row seats to this technological revolution. Patton's Third Army was driving north to relieve Bastogne when they encountered a German battalion attempting river crossing. The enemy believed darkness and fog concealed their movement from American observers. Traditional artillery would have required careful adjustment of fire, given Germans time to complete crossing or seek cover. But proximity-fused shells needed no such adjustment. Patton recorded the engagement in his memoir, War as I Knew It. His description remains chilling in its clinical precision. We caught a German battalion crossing the Sauer. The new posit ammunition was devastating. The shells burst in air above them. They had nowhere to run. The river behind them, our fire in front and above. When firing stopped, American forces counted 702 bodies. This figure represents one of the few precisely documented casualty statistics from proximity-fused employment during the entire war. The mathematical efficiency was stark. A single battalion essentially ceased to exist within minutes. No possibility of escape or effective defense. The psychological impact spread throughout German units across the sector. Soldiers began refusing orders to conduct river crossings. Fear became more powerful than military discipline. The Ardennes' dense forests, which Germans counted on for concealment, became death traps when proximity fuses entered the tactical equation. In open terrain, shells detonating at 30 to 50 feet were deadly enough. But in forested areas, the effects multiplied exponentially beyond calculation. Airburst explosions shattered tree branches into thousands of additional wooden projectiles. These splinters, some as long as human arms, traveled at hundreds of feet per second with lethal effect. Traditional defensive positions became useless overnight. Taking cover behind large trees provided no protection. Digging foxholes under root systems offered no sanctuary. The fragments and splinters came from above, negating centuries of accumulated tactical wisdom about forest fighting. American artillery units quickly recognized this multiplier effect and adapted their tactics accordingly. A single proximity-fused 155mm shell detonating above forest canopy could clear an area the size of tennis courts. All living things simply ceased to exist. The combination of metal fragments and wooden splinters created 360-degree kill zones. No amount of tactical skill could evade this mathematics of death. German units trained extensively in forest warfare found their expertise completely worthless. Spreading out to avoid concentrated casualties made units vulnerable to wide-area effects. Bunching together for mutual support meant entire squads could be eliminated by single shells. There was no correct tactical response to this revolutionary threat. The proximity fuse operated on principles that seemed like science fiction to soldiers raised in the 1940s. Each fuse contained a tiny radio transmitter operating between 180 and 220 megahertz, continuously sending out waves that reflected off objects below. Ground surfaces, trees, vehicles, human bodies. As shells approached their targets, reflected signals strengthened progressively. When signal intensity reached predetermined levels corresponding to optimal burst heights, electronic switches triggered detonation. The entire system functioned under conditions that would destroy normal electronics instantly. During firing, acceleration reached 20,000 times Earth's gravity, enough force to crush human bodies to microscopic thickness. Shells spun at rates creating massive centrifugal forces. Temperatures ranged from gun barrel heat of 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit to sub-zero conditions at trajectory peaks. Yet delicate vacuum tubes, protected by innovative cushioning systems, survived and functioned with over 80% reliability. The optimal burst heights had been determined through extensive testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground. For 105mm howitzers, the standard divisional artillery piece, 30 feet proved ideal for maximum effectiveness. The 155mm guns achieved maximum lethality at 50 feet above ground. The rare 240mm shells created devastating effects at 70+ feet, capable of clearing entire grid squares of enemy forces. This technological superiority translated directly into battlefield dominance that changed warfare's fundamental mathematics. Studies showed proximity fuses increased lethality by 5 to 10 times over conventional shells. Lethal fragment area increased by factors of 50. Anti-aircraft applications showed even more dramatic improvements. Shooting down V-1 flying bombs improved from 17% to 79% success rates within weeks of proximity-fused deployment. The German intelligence failure regarding proximity fuses proved catastrophic for their war effort. In December 1944, Wehrmacht forces overran American ammunition depots, capturing approximately 20,000 proximity-fused shells. This intelligence windfall should have led to immediate countermeasure development programs. Instead, German technical experts examined captured fuses and declared them impossible according to known physics and engineering principles. The presence of vacuum tubes in artillery shells contradicted everything German engineers believed about electronics and ballistics. They concluded Americans were using some form of magnetic detection systems, or that visible components were decoys hiding the real mechanisms. This failure stemmed partly from institutional blindness that affected German technical development. Germany had actually led proximity-fused development before the war began. Rheinmetall Borsig and AEG Berlin possessed working prototypes by 1940, but Hitler's order, canceling all weapons projects requiring more than 6 months for production, had terminated the program entirely. German engineers couldn't believe Americans had solved problems they themselves had abandoned as impossible. The irony deepened when considering German technical capabilities at war's outbreak. Their electrostatic proximity fuses showed 95% reliability in testing. using electrical capacitance changes rather than radar principles. Had development continued, Germany might have fielded proximity fuses by 1941. Hermann Göring later admitted during interrogation that German fuses were 3 or 4 months from production when the war ended. December 25, 1944, brought no holiday respite to combatants on either side. German units attempting to use Christmas for resupply and reorganization discovered that proximity fuses recognized no ceasefires or traditional military courtesies. Field kitchens came under devastating bombardment. Supply convoys were destroyed without warning. Assembly areas were eliminated by weapons that required no forward observers. The 420th Armored Field Artillery Battalion alone fired over 1,000 rounds on Christmas Day. Most were proximity fused. Their M7 Priest self-propelled howitzers delivered rapid, accurate fire that caught German units completely unprepared. The ability to fire effectively without observation changed artillery from daylight weapon into 24-hour threat. In poor weather conditions, during darkness, proximity fuses maintained their deadly effectiveness. The psychological impact proved severe among German troops, who had learned to move during poor weather when Allied aircraft couldn't fly, when observers couldn't spot targets for conventional artillery adjustment. Proximity fuses eliminated this sanctuary entirely. Death could arrive at any moment, in any weather conditions, with no warning beyond the brief whistle of incoming shells. On December 21st, SS Colonel Otto Skorzeny's elite commandos attempted to capture Malmedy. These weren't ordinary soldiers, but specially selected troops representing Germany's absolute finest. They had rescued Mussolini from Allied captivity, nearly captured Tito in Yugoslavia, successfully infiltrated American lines wearing United States uniforms during the battle's early phases. They represented the best Germany could field in terms of training, equipment, and motivation. They met devastating proximity-fused artillery fire that transformed their American disguises from tactical advantages into death shrouds. The shells exploded overhead with uncanny precision, as if they could detect the imposters moving below. While exact casualty figures remain disputed in historical records, the attack failed catastrophically. Heavy losses ended Skorzeny's offensive operations for the remainder of the battle. The psychological breakdown among elite SS troops proved particularly significant for German morale. These soldiers, indoctrinated with beliefs in German superiority and trained to the highest possible standards, found themselves helpless against American technology. Some survivors reportedly charged directly toward American lines, preferring quick death to continued bombardment under proximity-fused shells. Complete breakdown of military discipline among Hitler's most fanatical troops. The production miracle behind proximity fuses matched any wartime industrial achievement in American history. By December 1944, over 100 American companies had converted manufacturing capabilities to fuse production. The Crossley Corporation abandoned refrigerator manufacturing entirely for fuse assembly operations. Emerson Radio retooled from home electronics to weapons production. Sylvania, RCA, and General Electric dedicated entire facilities to the proximity fuse program. Quality control exceeded anything previously attempted in mass production manufacturing. Each of the 130 components underwent individual testing procedures. Every solder joint was inspected under magnification by trained technicians. Random samples were actually fired from artillery pieces to ensure survival under combat conditions. The rejection rate was ruthlessly maintained. Any component showing slight deviation from specifications was discarded immediately. The workforce, predominantly women, maintained this precision while working 12-hour shifts 6 days per week. They couldn't know what they were manufacturing due to security compartmentalization. They only knew their work was vital to the war effort. By December 1944, they were producing one proximity fuse every 2 seconds around the clock. The cost reduction achieved through mass production was remarkable by any standard. In 1942, each fuse cost $732, more than most workers' annual salaries. By December 1944, mass production had driven costs down to $18 per unit while maintaining quality standards. This efficiency allowed production of 22 million fuses during the war, with 200,000 deployed during the Battle of the Bulge alone. General Patton understood proximity fuses' value better than perhaps any field commander in the European theater. His Third Army, driving north to relieve Bastogne, used them as breakthrough weapons against German defensive positions. His artillery commander, Brigadier General Edward Williams, developed new tactics specifically for proximity fuse employment in offensive operations. Williams pioneered the time-on-target concentration using proximity fuses. Multiple battalions firing simultaneously, so shells arrived together at predetermined coordinates. When dozens of proximity-fused shells detonated simultaneously at optimal heights, the effect was absolutely apocalyptic. German soldiers called it the bell toll of death. In the week between December 22nd and 29th, Patton's Third Army fired 50,000 proximity-fused shells. The results proved decisive in breaking German resistance and opening the corridor to Bastogne. Patton himself wrote in his diary, "The funny fuse won the Battle of the Bulge for us. The Battle of Elsenborn Ridge demonstrated proximity fuses at maximum tactical effectiveness." Here, the 2nd and 99th Infantry Divisions held critical terrain against the 6th SS Panzer Army, including the elite 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler. Hitler's personal bodyguard unit expanded into a full armored division. Over 3 days, December 17th through 19th, American artillery fired 160,000 rounds. Approximately 40,000 were proximity fused. These 25% of shells accounted for an estimated 60% of the 5,000-plus German casualties. The mathematics were undeniable and brutal. Proximity fuses multiplied American firepower by factors of 4 or more. German attacks launched repeatedly up steep forested slopes met walls of airburst steel fragments. Entire companies disappeared within seconds of engagement. Bodies piled so thick that subsequent assault waves had to climb over their own dead. After 3 days of continuous attacks, German forces ceased offensive operations. The elite of the Waffen-SS had been broken by American technology. On January 1, 1945, the Luftwaffe launched Operation Bodenplatte. 900 fighters attacked Allied airfields across Western Europe. The surprise was complete, catching many Allied aircraft vulnerable on the ground. German pilots achieved significant tactical success in the initial attack phases, but returning German aircraft met walls of proximity fused anti-aircraft fire that changed everything. Of 277 German aircraft lost that day, 172 fell to anti-aircraft guns, most using proximity fuses. The kill rates stunned observers on both sides of the conflict. German pilots trained to evade predictive anti-aircraft fire found shells detonating precisely where they would cause maximum damage. No evasive maneuvers proved effective against weapons that sensed their presence. The Luftwaffe, already crippled by fuel shortages and pilot losses, never recovered from these devastating casualties. By early January 1945, maintaining absolute secrecy became impossible due to widespread battlefield employment. Too many shells had been fired in combat. too many soldiers had witnessed their revolutionary effects. On January 6th, the War Department authorized limited disclosure to the American press. The New York Times reported on a new type of artillery shell that multiplies the effectiveness of American guns, without explaining the underlying technology. German intelligence finally grasped the weapon's true significance, but understanding came too late to affect the war's outcome. A January 10th report from Foreign Armies West stated, "The Americans possess a radio-controlled artillery fuse that detonates shells at optimal height for anti-personnel effect. This weapon has caused severe casualties among our forces in the Ardennes. No effective countermeasures exist." Post-war analysis revealed proximity fuse's decisive impact on the Battle of the Bulge's outcome. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt stated during interrogation, "The proximity fuse was decisive. Our attacks broke down not because of American courage, though they fought well, but because of artillery that seemed to have eyes." General Hasso von Manteuffel, 5th Panzer Army commander, testified similarly. "The American artillery was the terror of our soldiers, especially the new shells that exploded in air. They caused panic, even among veteran troops." The statistical analysis tells the complete story with mathematical precision. 200,000 proximity-fused shells fired during the battle, accounting for an estimated 15,000 to 20,000 German casualties. Up to 20% of total German losses from a fraction of ammunition expended. The weapon achieved 5 to 10 times greater effectiveness than conventional ammunition, while requiring no forward observation in poor weather conditions. Behind every casualty statistic lay profound human tragedy that numbers couldn't capture. German soldiers, many teenagers conscripted in the war's final desperate stages, died in ways traditional warfare had never contemplated. They were killed by weapons that seemed to possess artificial intelligence that could find them wherever they attempted to hide. American production workers paid their own psychological price for this technological revolution. Factory accidents were hushed up for security reasons. Workers at Crossley Corporation, Emerson Radio, and other facilities suffered nervous breakdowns from stress and exhaustion. They produced weapons of unprecedented lethality without knowing what they were creating, carrying that burden in enforced silence for months or years. Yet the moral calculation of warfare is never simple or straightforward in its implications. The Battle of the Bulge cost 19,000 American lives in 6 weeks of fighting. Without proximity fuses, how many more would have died? How much longer would the war have continued? How many more Holocaust victims would have perished while battles raged across Europe? Every day the war was shortened, potentially saved thousands of prisoners in concentration camps, awaiting liberation by Allied forces. The proximity-fused program generated technological advances that transformed post-war civilian industries in ways developers never anticipated. The miniaturized vacuum tubes became foundations for modern electronics development. Quality control procedures established for fuse production became standard practices across American manufacturing. The organizational methods for coordinating hundreds of suppliers pioneered modern supply chain management techniques. Dr. James Van Allen applied his miniaturization expertise to satellite instrumentation programs, later discovering Earth's radiation belts that bear his name today. The radar principles evolved into modern air traffic control systems. The concept of autonomous sensors making split-second decisions became the foundation for guided missiles, eventually leading to all-precision smart weapons used in modern warfare. Every precision-guided munition deployed today descends directly from the proximity fuse, the first weapon that could sense its environment and choose optimal moments for detonation. The revolution that began in Ardennes forests continues on modern battlefields where smart weapons dominate tactical engagements. The Battle of the Bulge officially ended January 25, 1945, with German forces in full retreat toward their homeland borders. Hitler's last major offensive had cost Germany approximately 100,000 casualties, while achieving absolutely nothing strategically or tactically. American losses totaled 75,000 casualties, including 19,000 killed in action. But the proximity fuse had proven itself not merely as an improved weapon system, but as a genuine war-winning technology that changed warfare's fundamental equations. General Eisenhower's post-war assessment highlighted their strategic importance perfectly. German possession of proximity fuses might have made D-Day exceedingly difficult, perhaps impossible, according to his memoirs. They weren't simply artillery improvements, but revolutionary technologies that fundamentally altered warfare's mathematical foundations. The German soldiers who faced proximity fused artillery during those desperate winter weeks experienced something unprecedented in military history. Death delivered by shells that seemed genuinely intelligent. That could find them anywhere they attempted to seek shelter. That transformed the very air above their heads into killing zones. Their experience marked warfare's definitive transformation into the technological age we recognize today. From Colonel Axelson's unauthorized first use on December 16, 1944, through systematic deployment of 200,000 shells across Ardennes battlefields, proximity fuses demonstrated that scientific innovation could provide decisive military advantages. The convergence of American industrial capacity, scientific genius, and tactical adaptation created weapons that helped determine the war's ultimate outcome. The proximity fuse story represents transformation on multiple levels simultaneously. Technological revolution in weapons design, tactical evolution in artillery employment, human adaptation to warfare's changing nature. It proved that industrial democracy could produce weapons of devastating effectiveness when properly motivated and organized. That innovation could overcome numerical disadvantages on battlefields. That the side possessing superior science would likely prevail in prolonged conflicts. These lessons shaped not just World War II's final months, but the entire structure of warfare that followed throughout the Cold War era and beyond. In the frozen forests of the Ardennes during that brutal winter of 1944-45, the age of technological warfare truly arrived with devastating finality. The mathematics of death were permanently rewritten by tiny radar sets packed into artillery shells, forever changing how human beings wage war against each other. The German soldiers who died beneath proximity-fused airbursts were casualties not just of one particular battle in one specific war, but of a complete revolution in military affairs that continues shaping conflicts and international relations throughout our modern world today.